Hello, thanks for joining me. Uh, we are going to talk in this new series about the shift. And the shift is a really interesting idea and concept. I want to talk to you about how our world is changing so rapidly around us. So, for the next 20 or so minutes, I just want to kind of go through this concept with you and introduce this idea. Now, I'm old enough to remember Netflix movies that came through the mail. They came in these envelopes, they were red, they had the Netflix logo like you're used to, but there was no streaming service. It was DVDs and Blu-rays through the mail. And I think about how our world has changed so rapidly over the last 20 years. I mean, we go from movies that you have to go to a physical store, Bob's Movie Rentals, and then you go to through the mail with Netflix to DVD business completely shut down from Netflix and it's streaming online completely. That is a rapid, radical shift. And today, if you think there are so many ways, the ways that we learn, the ways that we consume media that have just radically shifted. Schools have gone from textbooks, like a physical book you take, we would put covers on our books to protect them, to Chromebooks. And business meetings have shifted from planes and expensive hotel rooms to jump on a Microsoft Team call, jump on a Zoom call. Shopping has moved from catalogs and malls to Amazon, eBay, online ordering. Movies, we started watching them on the big screen, and then sometimes they would come to your house a year or two later, to where now, a movie in the movie theater you can expect to see within just a couple of weeks on your TV at home if you'd prefer. I remember when I was a computer science major in college, I started that way at least. I talked to the department head and I said, I'm really interested in video and computers, and I would like to find a way to do video online. And I was told that is never, ever going to happen. Well, sometimes those things we think that are never going to happen actually end up happening. And so I think it's odd that despite all the innovations in the church, a lot of the way that we make disciples, pursue discipleship of Jesus, seems stuck in a model called the classroom model, lectures, classrooms, courses, workbooks, memorization, and these studies, what we call Bible studies or small groups, has not changed a lot since inception. And so we have kind of been focused on information transfer. We've got very informed minds, but very malformed followers of Jesus. The side effect is not unlike the religious leaders who put Jesus to death. You see very well educated people, they knew the Torah forward and backward, but even though they know the law, they are pretty horrible people in how they treat others. And so they've missed the mark of what God wanted them to do. They knew about God, like facts, but they weren't interested in forming their character, their values, their actions around God. And so if you think about schools now breaking up lectures with movements, interactive elements, and all kinds of new learning models and the shift, well, maybe there's something for us to learn in how humans have adapted and become cultured to learning. And maybe that should speak to what we're doing. It's interesting to me that the early church didn't look like a classroom at all. Discipleship was never like a classroom. It was more like a dinner table. It was more like meeting together, talking, chatting. Even communion has an element of food. There's something to that. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian, the German theologian, said it this way one time. He said, "The first service that one owes to others in the fellowship consists in listening to them." Classrooms are great at giving us information, but information is not the same thing as transformation. Transformation happens through relationships. I mean, you could listen to 1,000 of my sermons, but that one friend who will sit with you in your grief will actually impact your faith much deeper. You could memorize the Bible forward and backward. You could study hundreds of these workbooks. You go to Mardell and buy every Bible study they have. But the person who notices you're down and texts you to check in or sticks around after church and says, "Hey, let's grab a coffee," that's what actually builds your confidence and your trust in God. I don't think people are hungry for more content, but I know they're starving for connection. If you think about it, content's everywhere. YouTube, Spotify. You can find any kind of Bible, Christian content you want, any way to connect with God you want. Information is abundant. It's probably too much. It's a free 24-hour buffet that's just open. I mean, you can watch even pastors that are past. I watch dead pastors a lot that their messages meant a lot to me, whether it's Billy Graham, um, his great crusades and revivals, or others, or I can even read people like Spurgeon, those that weren't even around when recording technology existed, but they're free now online. So content's not the problem. Relationships, people to walk with us. You know, the internet and technology is great at what it does, serving us up content, but it's terrible at connection. And so my question to you is, what if Sundays at Coffee Creek was more about sparking a connection, laughing together about how awkward we are, and sitting together with each other and understanding, and listening to one another? Well, today in this story in Luke, what I want to talk to you about for just a moment is this idea that, you know, maybe there's more to this hospitality than we were thinking. Maybe there's something deeper going on here. And maybe, just maybe, if we would pay attention to the early church's examples, we could learn something about what we should be doing in the here and now. So this story is really short. It's a guy named Levi, and it says in the text that Jesus is leaving town. He saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at his tax collector's booth. And Jesus says to him, "Follow me and be my disciple." So Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Now think about this. This would be like you sitting at work in your office, and Jesus comes up and says, "Follow me and be my disciple," and you just leave. You leave all the work that's undone on your desk. You walk away from all your responsibilities, and you just go. Well, that's the first part. Now, in verse 29, the next part is what's really interesting. Levi, later it says, Levi held a banquet in his home with Jesus as the guest of honor. And many of Levi's fellow tax collectors and other guests also ate with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law, the people I was just talking about, who were very smart, they complained bitterly to Jesus' disciples. "Why do you eat and drink with such scum?" And Jesus answered them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do." Levi, who is later called Matthew, I find it very interesting that upon following Jesus and wanting to share Jesus with his friends and family and those that are like him, that are other tax collectors, he does not go down to the bookstore and buy a book. He doesn't sign them up for a small group. He doesn't hold a seminar. He doesn't hold a lecture. He doesn't say, "Buy my book." His first instinct, he throws a party. He sets the table at a banquet at his own home, and he invites them in. This simple table in his home becomes sacred ground. Hospitality became the launch pad of discipleship in the early church. And it's not just Levi. There's lots of other examples. For instance, in Acts chapter 2, this is the very earliest church we have recorded. This is the first church. They followed a daily discipline, it says in Acts 2. They followed a daily discipline of worship in the temple, the larger experience, followed by meals at home. And every meal was a celebration. This is the Message translation of the Bible. It said these celebrations were exuberant and joyful. These were fun events, and they praised God. And people in general liked what they saw. The outside people saw what they were doing and said, "Oh, wow, that looks exciting." And every day their number grew as God added to those who were saved. This is the way of Jesus, sharing life around a table, just as he did in the upper room, just as he continued to do with his disciples, walking with them and talking with them and dining with them. There is a place for the temple, right? It says it right there, the larger gathering. But there's also where the bulk of the growth seems to be happening, and that is in the smaller experiences. In Romans 12 even says this, be inventive in your hospitality. I love that kind of language there. It's this idea that we should be creative and think of ways to connect with people. And this is our opportunity to do that. John Wesley, who founded the Methodist Church and Methodism, said solitary religion is not to be found there. The gospel of Christ knows no religion but social, no holiness but social holiness. Now, what's instructive here is if you think about John Wesley, I just said he founded Methodism, the kind of rigorous study of the Bible and classes. Certainly we owe much of our idea of classroom learning to John Wesley, but we can't say that our current predicament is his fault by any means, because he was clear from the beginning. Religion is not a religion by yourself. This is social. Holiness is social. We are together in this. So I wanted to give you some real practical thoughts on this. What are some practical ways we could do this? Well, I think these are not perfect, but these are some ideas. Maybe you invite a coworker to lunch. Maybe you hear someone at work's going through something, and you just spend some time with them. You're hospitable to them. Maybe you share a meal with a neighbor, after work someday or on the weekend. Maybe you just linger for 5 minutes after church and you ask someone, "Hey, how are you really doing?" Um, all of these could be simple ways to start living this out, this practice of hospitality. And this is one of the spiritual practices. Now, common objections I hear. Well, if I'm going to have people over at my house, I need a bigger house. I'm going to need a better dining room table. I don't know what to do about the kids. I don't know. I don't have enough money to feed everybody all the time. But look, all those are easily solvable. You don't need a bigger house. Just make a smaller small group, right? Invite a few people. Invite, how many chairs do you have? Invite those people to your home. Um, Food. It can be a potluck. It can be simple, dirt simple, just coffee and cookies, right? Or go out somewhere or do a potluck. Everybody brings something that goes together. And the only real requirement to work on this spiritual practice of hospitality is to have an open heart, to be willing to say, you belong here. And then you put it in practice. You invite people, you take that step. And so, back to church Sundays coming up at Coffee Creek, we have this opportunity to do some good. We have an opportunity to invite some people. We are working hard on this new concept of Hangouts, and I've already put some of it up in the app, so you can check some of that out. But at coffeecreek.app. But basically, the idea is, what would it be like if Coffee Creek became known as a church where people, belong? They belong long before they believe. They belong long before they trust Jesus, because they're learning slowly to trust Jesus. And so we want to be a community where discipleship doesn't just happen on Sunday mornings, right? But it really, the growth happens around tables all week long, where everyone is welcome. And so when we launch out this idea of hangouts or parties on purpose or whatever you want to call it, we want them to be just like Acts was experiencing in Acts chapter 2, casual, joy-centered hangouts. The shift from curriculum and studies and classrooms to table-centered, Jesus-honoring connections. And here's the best part. Everyone can be a part of it. You can host a group in your home. You can host a small gathering. And it's not a weekly thing you're subscribing to. It's not something you're signing up and you're agreeing to do 1,000 of these. We're just saying 5. Would you, if you're going to be a host, we're going to ask you to agree to host 5 parties or 5 gatherings or 5 hangouts, whatever. Whether you do it at home, at a coffee shop, you rotate homes around a few of you, go to the park, a bowling alley, whatever this looks like for you, but 5 of these. And we'll give you a ton of ideas on September 21, but just planting that thought right now. What would it look like for you to host 5 gatherings between now and Christmas? That's the ask. And we'll have a full guide on this. The topic, we're gonna choose a topic for each season. And so this is the fall season. And so over these 5 hangouts, we're going to ask you to just have casual conversations with those that attend about Sabbath. Sabbath is this idea that is a biblical practice that God gives us that is a 24-hour rhythm of stop, of rest, of delight, of worship. And so in our world where things are getting quicker and faster and busier than ever, exhaustion is rampant, loneliness is rampant, burnout is rampant, this ancient practice is probably more of a necessity than it's ever been in human history. And so we're going to spend 5 times just talking about this. I've got content, videos you can watch, books you can read, websites you can check out in the app, coffeecreek.app. It's all free there. But the content's not the point. The content is only there to create opportunities for interesting conversations around this. The real goal is that we would get around this topic of focus on Sabbath and just talk about it and work through what it's going to look like. Because we're all in this together, and that's the big idea for today. Following Jesus was always, always, always meant to be a shared journey. It wasn't to be a lone ranger. It wasn't that you're on your own and you got to figure this out on your own. It was meant to be done in community. And so what if we were to really, own this idea of let's fill Coffee Creek Church with stories of meals being shared, laughter around tables, needs being met, prayers being said over people in backyard barbecues, and lives being transformed not by a program or a classroom or a course or a celebrity, but by presence of regular people, just me and you. What if this is really what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus? That we work and speak into people's lives that we do life with. So the shift is all about this idea of moving away from kind of systematic programs and people as numbers and shifting instead to very individualized learning, transformation over information, the table experience of having hospitality be our practice and sharing meals, dinners, coffees, desserts with one another, and digging into life together. Not how much can I memorize, how much can I know, but maybe more who am I becoming becomes the bigger question. So, this is where we will end for today. Next week in part 2, I'm going to move into a very practical teaching on what it looks like to host. We'll have some handouts and downloads you can look through. We've got, I think, 30 or so ideas for you of what you could do. Everything from doing food-centered gatherings like a Taco Tuesday gathering to activity-based gatherings like a game night or a movie night, service projects, to doing seasonal things like a pumpkin carving or a Friendsgiving get-together. There are so many ideas. We've got a complete guide for you. It's all free. We'll have that for you next Sunday. So join me then